Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. I'm here with the Chief Legal Officer and Chief Global Affairs Officer of Amazon, David Zapolsky. David, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. It's my first time at this forum, and I'm just so blown away by the quality of the panels and the intimacy of the venue. And so thank you, Peter, for having me, and it's great to be here.
We were both very impacted by the last session. It was really extraordinary.
Yeah, we're not going to outdo that.
And, oh, come on. No, but I think that there were so many thoughts out there and discussions and a lot of insights that prompted. And I was wondering if you had thoughts and what were your your takeaway was from that.
Well, that was a great panel, and there were a lot of really interesting themes, more than I could really cover. But I think two things I would underscore. First of all, Senator Round's comment about the Western rails is real. You have several, I hate the word, but hyperscalers in the West who are investing historic amounts of capital in order to build out an AI infrastructure that will work for the entire West and for other countries. And I couldn't agree more with the sentiment that I think we all have a shared interest in having as many different countries, developers around the world, developing on that Western AI stack. And so that's one. And then I think the other really remark that resonated with me was the gentleman from Estonia, who said, he didn't accept the premise that there's a difference in interests between Europe and the United States, or for Canada, between Canada and the United States for that matter. We are allies. We're allies through a number of different multinational organizations, including NATO. And I think the long-term strength of the West is going to rely on those alliances and our ability to work together.
On that note, let's talk a little bit about what Amazon is doing in Ukraine. Now, you all were there prior to the invasion.
Yeah, we were there. We were engaging with the country, with the leadership right at the beginning of the war. And when the war broke out, we were able to basically transfer the data from the government, from 24 universities, from some financial institutions, property records, into what I'll describe as high-tech suitcases. And we were able to put them on the back of trucks and get them out of the country literally and upload them to our cloud region in Frankfurt, where the government of Ukraine was then and is still able to access and continue operations using its cloud-based infrastructure from our Frankfurt region before the data centers from which that data came were bombed. And so, and we continue to be integrally involved in supporting the Ukraine war effort. We're helping them in a variety of ways, both in operating their government and militarily. We've supported them with over $100 million of credits and support, technical support, and that's an effort that continues. We were very honored to receive the Ukraine Peace Prize from President Zelensky, and I had the opportunity to meet President Zelensky at the UN General Assembly and underscore our continued support, and not just for the war effort, but for looking ahead for the recovery and rebuilding that we're going to have to do. So it's been a priority for us, and we were honored to be able to play that role.
I think in terms of that continuity and that commitment, what do you see going forward, and how do you, given Amazon's footprint, what does that influence look like, and the partnerships and the collaboration across Europe and elsewhere look like?
Well, about 10 years ago, Amazon made a decision to go all in to support the intelligence community, the defense community of both the US and our allies. And we've built that business. We're continuing to grow it and carry those workloads and work with our public sector partners to build out that infrastructure on behalf of those alliances. Every Five Eyes country makes use of Amazon's web services, classified and top secret services. We work with Diana, we work with the NATO countries, both member states and with NATO itself. Next year we will have top secret restricted and unrestricted capabilities with NATO. So that's an area that we've invested in heavily. In terms of Ukraine, again, everything about Amazon, one of our mantras is we try to think long term, which means we're typically thinking beyond the sort of short-term turbulence of politics or sort of short-term political sentiment. And so long term, we all need to be thinking about what does the recovery in Ukraine look like? How can we be a part of it? What are the systems we need to put in place to maintain that country's ability to remain strong even after the conflict? And so just one example is we're working with an organization called Halo, which employs AI and cloud-based AI capability to analyze drone photographs of areas of the country that have been where landmines have been laid, and we're able to much more quickly than you could otherwise identify where the landmines are and work with Halo to remove them and return the land so that it's safe for citizens. So things like that, use cases where this technology can be used to sort of speed up and sort of do the work on steroids that we need to do in order to make the country strong and resilient.
The last session we were talking about urgency and scale and sort of being able to innovate and iterate quickly. Do you feel that pressure and that urgency in Ukraine, and then what are the other areas where you want to be able to apply that approach?
Yeah, absolutely it exists in Ukraine, and our systems are part of that 2-week cycle in many cases of iteration and testing. You can't do it without that cloud-based compute and data storage capability. And with AI, you can analyze that data, just huge amounts of it, as Senator Rounds mentioned, in ways that that weren't possible before. Likewise, quantum computing will be integral into speeding up the process of that type of analysis. And so I think we feel urgency to use those technologies to bring that type of speed of iteration, speed of innovation to our other public sector partners, including, we've talked to Diana about it, they're on the forefront in NATO of looking for ways to accelerate that, even down to traditional procurement processes, which can take months. Just drawing from my own experience within Amazon, there are so many ways that we can use AI to automate and speed up processes that have taken months, if not years, to do in the past. From contract analysis to processing large amounts of bid data, to back office processes, and you have to go case by case. It's not a one size fits all thing, and it shouldn't be. But I think all of those innovations can be brought to the public sector to enable our armed forces and our allies to move faster and be more nimble.
I want to ask you a question about regulations. A couple of years ago, someone went to the Hill and said, please regulate us. And 2 years later, they said, not so much. Otherwise, we won't beat China. So what does that look like for you? And we have a few senators in the room. Where is that balance between regulating enough, putting in enough guardrails, particularly with all the concerns about safety, and sort of the proper guardrails? I guess you want to put your legal hat on, but what would be the best case scenario for the user, not Amazon?
Yeah, I think in approaching regulation, you have to look at the use cases. Again, the details matter, and work backwards. What are the bad things you want to stop happening or prevent from happening? And work backwards to develop smart regulation that addresses those concerns. Because there's a lot of bad outcomes that are already regulated. If you look at AI and medical devices, well, there's a lot of regulation around the types of uses that can be made already. So we've been a consistent advocate at Amazon of thoughtful, use case-based, governance-based regulation of AI. We think it's fair for model developers to provide a certain level of transparency into what their models are, how they were trained, what they're good for, and what they shouldn't be used for. We think it's useful if everybody who's developing and deploying models has watermarking for images and other media that will reveal if the media is generated by AI. And we're working on ways to standardize and make widely available the methods of interpreting those watermarks so that there are the right types of flags that similar to what was referred in the prior panel. There are in addition guardrails that companies like Amazon, who offer these services within a secure cloud-based environment, can provide, like tools that will allow deployers to control how the AI behaves. So how toxic it can be, at what kinds of content it shouldn't surface or should surface. And then of course there's a whole raft of testing, red teaming. All of those things I think are legitimate things to expect of folks who develop and innovate in this space, and I think are the legitimate subject of regulation. What's important though, is that we do that regulation with an eye toward what's happening, what else is happening in the world, how other countries, other parts of the world are approaching it. Because if the regulations aren't interoperable, then you're going to create outliers where certain parts of the world, it's either more expensive, less efficient, or just impossible to roll out technology that people need and that can actually bring benefits to our economies, improve productivity, and in the public sector, make our armed forces more secure.
I think we can take a couple of questions. We'll get a microphone over here in the front row. In the front row.
Hi, Peter McKay, Deloitte, local guy, friend of Peter's.
Okay.
You've in part answered the important question, and I think Senator Rounds and others have highlighted this issue of guardrails. How do we keep tech moving in the right direction, being a force for good? By the way, thank you for what you and Amazon are doing with respect to the support for Ukraine. This is the enabler. But as the enabler, we know that we're in this race. This race, some said without end, but a race that is coming from democracies versus the non-democracies, who are not so inclined to put legal parameters or limitations. And so in that context, from the legal and the office in which you hold, what keeps you up at night? Try not to scare us too much.
Well, I get a chance to answer that question a lot on stages like this and elsewhere. And I would say, and it's consistent with the theme of this entire gathering, I first of all, I sleep pretty well. I'm very lucky. Not everybody gets to say that. So I do sleep pretty well. But I think the real answer is that over the last 15 to 20 years, we've seen a global drift toward protectionism, toward sovereignty, towards erection of borders, tariffs, gates on the free flow of data, xenophobia, nationalism. All of those trends, and they're not really limited to any part of the world, are, I think, troubling for the citizens of countries all over the world. And from a purely parochial sense, if you think about what Amazon does, we deliver packages across borders. We provide internet services and cloud-based services that cover continents, not countries. All of those things break Amazon's business models. We're deeply invested in every country where we do business. We can't do business without doing that. Here in Canada, we're one of the largest employers in the country. We have nearly 50,000 people. So it's not like we can just sit in America and sort of watch the world. We are actually in all these parts of the world. And whenever there are barriers, whether they be tariff barriers or barriers to data, free flow of data, anything that impedes those open exchanges, it's a problem for us. And so we get to be consistent. We get to be by basically saying the same message. Here in Canada, in Brussels, in DC, wherever we go, we talk about the potential for increased innovation, increased economic productivity, increased safety and security. The fewer barriers like that we have. And so that's a long-winded answer, but that is the truth. That is what keeps me up at night. And I wish I had a solution. That's why it keeps me up at night. Because this sort of global drift, this trend, away from democracy is one that's, I think, troubling, and I wish I had a better answer.
I think one more question. Gentleman in the corner.
Thank you. Eloge Butera with the Raoul Warrenberg Center for Human Rights in Montreal. On a regular week, I have at least 3 interactions with Amazon-related product, whether it's my kids trying to watch entertainment on TV or packages showing up on my doorsteps. That's about 3 more than I do with my member of parliament.
Thank you for being a customer.
In today's democracy, your ability to touch a regular citizen is much greater than that of the state. My question to you is, the nation state we have since the treaties of Westphalia and how they interact with your institutions, what do you see is your role in defending democracy in this time?
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence that we have the ability to do that. I honestly think there's been a failure in democracy if you have to rely on private companies to defend it. We are there to be partners with the governments that we work with, and we can serve a lot of different ends, and we want to work cooperatively. I don't think we're the last line of defense, though. We really rely on like the senators in the room, the ministers in the room, to do that, and we're here to support. And our business famously relies on focusing on what our customers want and need, and working backwards from that to provide it to them, to innovate in new ways to bring it to them. And that includes our public sector and customers in the military and the intelligence communities in the United States and here and among all of our allies. And so, we are ready to lock arms and be partners with all of our customers and partners, but we certainly can't and wouldn't presume to do it alone.
I'm going to ask you one question because we're almost out of time, but it's very as of the moment. We're in an age where there's a government that puts pressure on companies, people, for his own gain. You have been so steadfast in your support for Ukraine. What will Amazon do if your government says stop?
Well, America is democracy, still is. And the fact is, the president, a senator, doesn't have that power. We have binding contracts, long-term relationships with NATO partners and with the government of Ukraine. And so the only way that we would, we would consider changing what we do for that customer would be if we were legally prevented from doing so. And for that to happen, you'd have to go pretty far down a far-fetched road of, this international sanctions regime, which I just don't, I think is too far-fetched. We're a private business. We're not the government. We're not an arm of the government. We work closely with governments, both the U.S. and governments around the world, our allies. But we have an obligation to Ukraine, moral and contractual, and we will continue to fulfill that unless we are prevented by law.
Everyone, David Zapolsky.
Thank you.
Good to see you.